Well, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone for tonight's program. I'm really looking forward to this. I can't remember, somebody on the board mentioned something about doing a program on vultures. I think it was Russ Preston. And ever since then, I think Judy and I have been pushing really hard for this program. So I'm really excited about it. And we appreciate Jen coming tonight. Before we start, I'm going to turn it over to Ed in a second, but I'd like to just let everyone know about some upcoming activities that we're going to have. And you can go to the Seabrook Island Birders.org website and register for any of these. The first one is Monday, September the 20th. We're going to be on North Beach. It's going to be Learning Together at North Beach from 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. So being at the beach at that time of the morning is lovely, even if you're not looking at birds, but if you've got someone there helping you spot and identify birds, it makes it even better. The only thing is, again, with the scope, the person that will be leading does have a scope, but at this point, we're not sharing scopes. So if you have your own scope, certainly bring your binoculars, but if you sign up, bring your own equipment to look through. And then on September the 21st, we're going to do our backyard birding, but we're going to use the lake house as our home to do the backyard birding in, or a home base. So that's going to be from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And we're doing it at that time of night because we have a lot of roosting birds coming in, especially the ibis, egrets, herons. So that's always fun. And two, we're going to walk around Palmetto Lake, and there's a lot of warblers migrating through. So hopefully we'll get some migrating warblers. The third one that we were talking about earlier is we're going to go off island to Fort Moultrie on Sunday, September the 26th. And that's our Beyond Our Backyard trip. Craig Watson is going to be leading that trip. He's a migratory bird biologist. He's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And he lives in Mount Pleasant. So he knows the area and he'll be a great resource. That should be a really fun trip to go to. And you can always go to the fort after the birding and make it a day. And then finally on Monday, September 27th, from 8:30 to 10:30, we're going to be at the golf course. This is always very popular. So if you want to bird on the golf course, we're going to be Crooked Oaks that day. This fills up quickly. So if you want to do that, you should go ahead and sign up for that. And this is the time of year you'll be getting a lot of migrating birds, and it's always a nice variety of birds on the golf course anyway. So that's the upcoming activities, and I am going to turn it over to Ed and let him introduce our speaker.
Okay, great. Thanks. This is our 8th Zoom program since June of last year, and some of us may remember we met Jen back in October when she did the excellent Rivers of Raptors program. That's a mouthful. Okay. Jen, I were talking, we actually met you before October of last year. We met you in 2015 in front of your house, looking at your bird feeders.
Yes.
Now, right? You got to get this right. You have to believe that someone that works for South Carolina Audubon would have some amazing bird feeders and therefore get some amazing birds. And Jen does. And we saw Western Tanager, black-throated hummingbird, black-chinned, thank you, black-chinned hummingbird. That's a Baltimore Oriole. So that's when we met. When Jen did the program, River of Raptors, she mentioned if you'd ever like to learn about this mysterious bird that's got a lot of good things going on for it, the vulture, invite me back. So we did. And if you read Jen's bio, she's a master bird bander, an expert in bird biology. She has a BS from Coastal Carolina, master's degree from the College of Charleston. She's worked for Wild Birds Unlimited and the Center for Birds of Prey. And I love Jen's title, Bird Friendly Communities Coordinator with South Carolina Audubon. And she works on bird-friendly communities, benefits of native plants, and does a lot of banding and painted bunting research. So let's give Jennifer Tyrrell a warm welcome. And Judy, will you turn the program over to Jen, please, as host?
I think Jennifer, what do I have to do here?
I think I might be okay. I've got the share screen option. So
I think that's what it is. Yeah, some people may want. I think everybody's muted already. So I think there you go, Jennifer.
Awesome. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And let me just double check. Can you guys see the view that's the full screen view? Okay, great. All right, so I will get started talking about one of my favorite topics. Thank you very much for that warm introduction. I love vultures, and a lot of people kind of give me a funny look when I mention that, but they are really cool, and I'm going to tell you why and give you lots of reasons to love them too. So hopefully I can convert all of you to being vulture fans. And this is a good timely talk because International Vulture Awareness Day was the first Saturday of September. So it's still a vulture-y time of year. But there's a reason for having that awareness day, and I will get into it in just a little bit. But just to give you an overview of what we're going to be looking at today, we have vulture culture. So how vultures have played a role with humans over the course of our history, the different lore around vultures. And then we're going to talk about the different vultures of the world. There's two groups, Old World Vultures and New World Vultures, and then their adaptations, some of their misconceptions and the realities, the vultures here in South Carolina, their ecology, and then the vultures that are in peril, both here and abroad. And then I'll touch on International Vulture Awareness Day, which was very recently. All right, so getting into the vulture history here. Vultures have been a part of history for a very long time, and you can probably understand why. Death is a mysterious thing for many cultures, especially early on when people didn't really understand what was happening, and so they saw this bird associated with death, and it meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But in ancient Turkey, vultures played a role in their culture, as their loved ones or whomever died. Their heads were actually removed from the body, and the bodies were placed on sky burial towers, and the vultures then took the souls in the body up to the heavens, where they believed that's where the afterlife was. But once the bones were all cleaned off, they would actually reunite the head and the rest of the skeleton and put it in like a bench in the home. So Great Aunt Gertrude turned into an ottoman in your house, and you just kept her there forever. So a piece of them stayed with the family, and then a piece of them went on to the afterlife. So very interesting vulture culture from ancient Turkey. And then going back to ancient Egypt, it's interesting because a lot of people see vultures as harbingers of death and bad things, but in ancient Egypt they were actually seen as a maternal force. They were a maternal symbol. A lot of you have probably seen Our Vultures, the way they put their arms out. They saw that as a protective type posture, and so a lot of the deities, goddesses, pharaohs, anyone of royalty, they would often have vultures on their headdresses as a protection. And then cobras also had kind of that lore of protection, but just for kings. And so you'd often see vultures and cobras together to protect the rulers or the kings or the pharaohs. So it's interesting that they had this maternal quality to them, where you don't see that in many other cultures because of the death association. In ancient times in Mexico and Central America, where the Aztecs were, a lot of us are familiar with their fun habit of human sacrifice. And you can guess why the vultures were associated with that part of their society back in the Aztec and Mayan cultures with human sacrifice, because they probably came to pick off what was left. So no surprise there. But one cultural significance a lot of us are familiar with is the practice of sky burials. And sky burials actually occurred across many cultures across the world. our Native American cultures here practice sky burials. They would build a platform and put the body on top, and then the vultures would carry the soul off to the sun or to the heavens. But it was also more than just Native Americans, ancient Iranians, Tibetan Buddhists, Indians. So a number of different religions practice this, but the more renowned ones that still happen today are in Tibet. It's, you know, the Tibetan Sky Burials. And this is a picture of one from afar. But it's really interesting. I was reading up on it when I was preparing for this this talk, and the way that they do that is it's something else, because what they do is they take the body up to this special place and they'll light a fire, and the vultures have learned that the smoke column is associated with food, and so they'll come in when they see the smoke and follow in and you know, help kind of dispose of the body. And so they've actually trained their wild vultures there. And vultures back in Roman times were the bird of war, because they would see large armies marching places and knew what was coming. It was a battle where there was going to be lots of food. So when they would see armies, they would all start gathering and circling. So vultures are very intelligent, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But of the birds I've ever worked with, they are probably the smartest outside of crows and jays. So, you know, little known fact about them, very smart. So anyways, with these sky burials, they would light the fire, the vultures would come in, and then the body would be tied up in like a curled up position. And there's only a couple people there, usually the Tibetan monks and especially assigned ones there to kind of help the process along, if you know what I mean. And the vultures would come in and eat, and they would, to make it a happy transition for the soul, they act very lightheartedly, they sing songs and they act joyous to make it a good atmosphere for the soul who's moving on. And then the vultures consume the body, and then they will go in and actually crush up the bones, because it's bad luck if anything is left over, even a little bit of bone. So they would crush it up, mix it up into this like kind of like a hush puppy type thing. They mix it up into a dough ball and then they throw the dough balls to the vultures to make sure every last bit gets eaten. And then the vultures carry the soul off into heaven. So it's really neat how sacred these animals are in some places, and how much other people just think they're awful and disgusting. In Charleston, heard before, they call Charleston eagles, because, you know, vultures have just a nasty reputation. But the vultures did such a big job downtown cleaning up the innards and extra pieces from the meat market. They were really important to keep the streets clean, and so they wanted to give them a, you know, honorable name. They were the Charleston Eagles, and there was actually a fine if you harass them or hurt them at all. So it's kind of neat. They were protected very early on for their function in our society, even here in Charleston. All right, so now moving on to the different types of vultures. We have Old World and New World. Old World is Asia and Africa, Australia. New World is North America and South America. And if you look at these two vultures, they look very similar. I mean, you can honestly tell right away, yes, those are obviously both vultures. But what's kind of interesting is these guys are not related. So if you go back and look at them, they're not related. They didn't come from the same lineage or common ancestors. They are actually a product of what's called convergent evolution. So that means in two separate parts of the world, two species evolved into the same niche, and they did the same type of ecosystem job. And so they ended up looking alike. So if you look at these guys, we have penguins on the left and puffins on the right. Penguins live in the South Pole. Puffins are very North Atlantic and North Pacific birds, but they are not related at all. And yet they seem, I mean, but looking at them both, you would never guess that they're a different family of birds. So that's convergent evolution. And so our vultures, they came from a different common ancestor than the Old World vultures. So they both evolved from a different group to serve this role as primary scavenger. In the Old World, those vultures actually evolved from eagles. So like golden eagles and things like that. That's their closest ancestor in the Old World. Our vultures actually evolved from storks. So a neat thing that you can see a similarity in, and I can't remember if I touch on this later in the presentation or not, but vultures, they cool off by urinating on their legs. It's called urohidrosis. And if you look at a vulture's legs, they're usually either red if it's a turkey vulture or black, but when you look at them, they look chalky white because it's covered in uric acid. And that's from the evaporative cooling created by the urohidrosis, because birds can't sweat. And if you're dressed all in black in South Carolina in the summertime, you got to cool off somehow. And that's how they do it. And storks, if you look at them, they do the same thing. They urohydrate. So it's a very odd specific behavior that you can see in both our vultures and the storks. And then if you look at that stork's head, I mean, you could easily mistake it for a vulture if it wasn't for that long bill. They also have a naked head, and that is actually to keep them clean, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And this is a picture of the Old World Vultures. Some of them, there's about 20 species between Africa and Asia. And unfortunately, they're very imperiled, but we'll talk about that soon. To give you an appreciation for how amazing vultures are and the records they beat, the highest flying bird ever recorded was actually a Rappel's vulture, and it was observed flying at 40,000 feet. And you wonder, how the heck did someone identify a bird flying at 40,000 feet? Well, unfortunately, it's because this bird flew into a jet engine, and they were actually able to identify the bird that flew into their engine by DNA analysis. So they wanted to figure out what bird was so high up there that it ran into a commercial airline, and it was this guy. So birds in general have amazing abilities to store extra oxygen in their blood, even at high altitudes, because we can never be up that high and be able to breathe. That's why they have those masks that drop down on planes if you lose cabin pressure and things like that. So their adaptations are just incredible. So this is the Egyptian vulture. This is one you often see in movies sometimes when they use non-native vultures, because they're a little bit prettier looking, they're kind of pristine, but they have, I guess, I want to say folklore. Back in, let's see, I think I have it in here. Yes, they were praised in Turkey and Bulgaria for saving Muhammad from a golden eagle, and he earned his white plumage. Obviously, that's not how that happened, but that is a folklore surrounding the Egyptian vulture. It's very real. And they also use it in a really cool practice called parahawking. So that's where you can actually go up in the air on a paraglider with a trained vulture, and you can fly around with it. And you have a glove, and the vulture will come and land your hand. This is available more in Europe than anywhere else, but I think there are some places here that have started to run parahawking businesses where you can go and literally fly with the birds, which is really cool. But they use Egyptian vultures because you can use them in commercial businesses without trouble for species here. And vultures are just so easy to train. They're very smart. So you can do crazy things like this, and they're just all about it. And then this is just funny. These are rabbit-faced vultures, and they look like they're showing off their pants. The way they stand. They have very fuzzy legs, and it's really cute. And those guys live in Africa. Yeah, those are just some of my favorite vulture-related memes. This is called a white-headed vulture, and that is another one of the common species, I believe, in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. But the variety of vultures there, they always have that big fluffy collar that, you know, Disney cartoons like to have on all the vultures in all the movies, like the Jungle Book and things like that. They've got that typical Halloween store vulture, you know, decoration kind of look to them. And some of them do have a fuzzy head, some do not, but they are pretty amazing animals. Now, looking at the New World vultures, so these are the vultures that occur in our side of the world. So starting from the bottom right, we have the Andean condor, which is enormous. They live in South America. Then we have the our condor, the California condor, and then we have the king vulture, who is very fancy. I'll show you him in a second. And the black vulture, which I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with, turkey vulture. Then you have the greater yellow-headed vulture and then the lesser yellow-headed vulture. If you wanted to see those two in person, the Center for Birds of Prey does have a few lesser yellow-headed vultures, which are very similar to our turkey vultures. They're more of like a tie-dye colored head. Very pretty. So this is the king vulture. Isn't he stunning? Very, very handsome. They have a lot of different colors on them, and it has to do with breeding. You find them in the jungles of South America. This one, let's see, I'm not sure where this one was seen, but I've got pictures of them. I think there's one at the Smithsonian Zoo. I think there's one at the National Aviary in Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken. And Riverbanks might have one as well. Either way, they are stunning. And so when people say, oh, vultures are ugly, just show them this picture. They're just amazing. This is the lesser yellowhead vulture that I was mentioning before, another South American species that's very similar to our turkey vulture, but like I said, it's like tie-dye, it's like a sunset. So you just got to appreciate vultures for their own beauty. So the Andean condor is in South America, and it is the world's largest flighted bird, and it can weigh up to 33 pounds. So that is quite the physical feat to be able to actually get off the ground. Most birds, like our bald eagles here in South Carolina, they might weigh 6 pounds. So just to give you an idea of how hefty and big this bird is, so like a fraction of the size of these guys. And then this is a California condor, and they had quite the
excuse me, Jennifer. Jennifer, you're garbled. I'm wondering if you could move your speaker maybe a little bit different. Your microphone. Now you're muted.
I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Nope.
Can you hear me? No? How about now?
Let's drop.
No.
Nope. Let's
see. I will sign off really quickly and switch my Wi-Fi. Be right back. Be right back.
So Jennifer, in case people didn't see, she's going to sign off and sign back in and see if she gets a better connection.
I could understand her, but it was a challenge, so I figured let's see if we can get it fixed.
Yeah, and I thought it was just me, but I can see it obviously isn't.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Sometimes my internet gets a little funny occasionally, so sorry about that. Let's go right back to where we were talking about, let's see. Let me stop share real quick. Share one more time. Here we go. Okay. Are you guys able to see it? Thumbs up? Awesome. Okay. Sorry about that technical difficulty. We'll get right back on here with the California condor. A little bit different looking than the Andean condor, definitely not as big, but still one of the largest birds we have in North America. Very few left, but we'll talk about their conservation in just a little bit. All right, so the next thing we have here is our vultures here. So this is a great side-by-side of the turkey vulture and the black vulture. Turkey vultures typically have a red head. As juveniles, they will have a dark head. And they will also have a dark beak. So this is a young bird. You can see its dark bill spot here. As they get older, it turns all white. And this bit of fuzz here is some baby peach fuzz he's just starting to lose. So this bird is probably 6 months old or so. And you can see he was sitting under this other bird and got pooped on. It's kind of funny. But this is a black vulture here. And this one looks like an adult to me. But you can tell there's a big difference between the nostrils on these two birds. This one's huge, this one's tiny. So if you've got a picture of a vulture head up close and you're not sure which one you're looking at, the nares or a bird nostril is a good way to look and kind of figure out which one you're looking at there. So some of the anatomy and adaptations of vultures are really, really specialized and really interesting because of what they do. They have one of the dirtiest jobs out there. They're scavengers. And to be able to stay healthy and alive as a scavenger, you have to have some pretty amazing adaptations. This is John James Audubon's painting of black vultures, which is pretty gnarly. This deer died, and sometimes the only way into a tough deer hide is through the eyeballs or the mouth. So that's what he was trying to illustrate here. One misnomer here is when you see something like this, you see vultures circling overhead, it means there's something dying. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that and thought, oh, there must be something dead over there, but that is not true. Vultures will actually circle in order to travel easier. They are very smart, and because you don't know when the next thing is going to die, you have to conserve your energy. So you can't just go flying around for funsies. They will actually use air currents as a way to travel very efficiently. So this is called convection current flight. So what they'll do is they'll find a rising column of hot air, often created by like parking lots, like the Citadel Mall is always just a giant heat island generating heat. And so it causes this rising column of air, and they use it like an elevator. So they just go way up. And once they kind of reach the top of that column, then they glide down to the next column of rising hot air they see, maybe over an open field or another building, and they'll go way, way, way up and keep going. Vultures can fly for almost hundreds of miles without ever having to flap their wings. So they are extremely efficient, conserving their energy and traveling long distances. Because again, you don't know when the next thing is going to drop dead. So you got to conserve your energy until you get to the next thing. And when you get to the next dead thing, they often will gather together. So usually what happens is turkey vultures will actually find the carcasses first, because they have a really good sense of smell. You saw how big their nose was? All the better to smell dead stuff with, my dear. They will usually find the dead animal. And then the black vultures, they don't have a good sense of smell. You saw how tiny their nares were. They're just like tiny slits in their beak. They can't smell, and so when they see turkey vultures beelining it somewhere, they follow too. And black vultures are a little bit bulkier, a little bit tougher, and so when they show up to a kill site, the turkey vultures eat as much as they can, and then the black vultures come in and bully them out. Fun new vocabulary words. Vultures, when they show up to a kill or a dead animal, a group of them is called a wake, because they're visiting the dead. And a group of vultures in the air is usually called a kettle, or a general group of vultures can be called a venue. So fun facts and new vocab words for the day. So here's some anatomy. Crop is kind of like a forestomach that a lot of different birds actually have, but some species of vultures, like this hooded vulture here, they have what's called an exposed crop. And so if they haven't eaten, you can't see it. But this guy, this hooded vulture, who has the most beautiful blue eyes up close, he has recently eaten. And so that crop will bulge out of his neck. And it's a good way to just kind of hold the food, and they can eat a whole bunch right away, because you never know what you're going to find when you come down to a carcass. If there's wild dogs or something else that could hurt you, you have to eat as much as you can, as quickly as you can. Store it in that crop, and then you can slowly digest it later. So here's another picture. This is a terrible picture, but it's one that I saw the king vulture in Pittsburgh when I went there, and he had just eaten. You can see this giant exposed crop. So he was nice and happy and full, probably about to go take a nap. Now, a lot of people have heard that vultures will projectile vomit as a defense mechanism. That's not really true. So what they'll do is, if they've been eating at a meal, something dead, like I said, they have to eat as much as they can, as quickly as they can. Say, if you're in Africa, a wild dog or a lion or something shows up and is about to come after you because you're bigger and maybe there's not much food left, they will actually lighten the load by ejecting all the food that they just ate and running off and getting away. Because when you're a very large bird, all that extra weight is not going to allow you to escape from danger. So they will quickly lighten the load and take off. So it's not a projectile. It's not like shooting vomit like a gun at things to horrify them. So that's been kind of miscommunicated or a misconception over time. So bald is beautiful and cleaner. You wonder why they have those big naked heads. It's for a very good reason. Vultures, because they eat dirty, rotting animals, and they stick their heads into the body cavities of rotting meat. They have to be able to stay clean to stay healthy. And so if they had feathers all over their face, it would just collect bacteria and food gunk and cause infections and all that kind of stuff. So They have those naked heads that they're able to clean much easier, and then the sun can shine on it and kill the germs and things like that. So I like to, when I talk about this to kids, I tell them, you know, if you had a big plate of spaghetti and you had a big bushy beard and you couldn't use your hands to eat it, you would be disgusting. And if you weren't allowed to take a bath afterwards either, you would just have rotting spaghetti in your beard all day. So the bald head is very functional, though not super fashionable. Now this vulture is very, very cool. It's called the Bearded Vulture, and you can see why. He's got a cute little fashionable goatee right here. And they do have a little bit more feathers on their head than other vulture species, but they can digest bones, and they've been spotted using tools to crush open bones and eat the marrow inside. So that's really interesting that they're intelligent enough to actually use tools, but we thought that was once only a human trait. But now we know that crows and chimps and apes and all of them can use tools, and so can vultures. But the stomach acid inside of a vulture's stomach is so strong, they found that it could digest a cow vertebrae, which is big, in 2 days through the peptic enzyme and the stomach acid. So the Proventriculus is that kind of forestomach that I was mentioning before. And then we mentioned the Urohidrosis. This is what I was talking about. So if you can see this white stuff on their legs right there at the bottom, that is this vulture urinating itself or expelling concentrated uric acid. That's one, to cool off, and two, I think it may have a germ killing mechanism because uric acid is acidic and it's probably not a great growing environment for bacteria. And oftentimes they will use their feet for tearing off pieces of food to kind of give them better leverage. And so that's just my little theory. It hasn't been tested, but that is the example of urohidrosis that you can actually see. So they're just keeping it cool by peeing on their legs. And then these are some storks actually from Africa, and you can see evidence of urohidrosis on their legs too. So their skin color is actually this like deep pink color, but their legs are all white looking, and that's because they're urohydrating. So next time you're looking at a group of wood storks, take a look and see if you can notice the urohidrosis or the uric acid caked on their legs. Now I mentioned not a lot of birds have a sense of smell that we can really decipher. There's still some studies going on with that. People said birds can't taste or smell at all, but then some studies suggest that they do, maybe not in the same way that we do. But one of the most amazing noses in the entire animal kingdom is that of the turkey vulture. And if you look at, this is a weird cross section. So if you're looking at a vulture, it was like kind of sliced right down the front of its face. So you're looking at a cross section of its nasal cavity, and you can see that big spiral of tissue. That is all tissue, which is surface area that will react with chemical or particles in the air to detect scents. And they're very, very accurate and very, very sensitive. And actually gas companies will eject the smell of rotting flesh into gas lines, which is why it has that funky smell. And so if there's a leak in the gas lines out west, the vultures will start gathering around where the leak is. So the gas companies can actually locate those gas leaks based on the vultures. And that's part of the reason why they put the smell on there. And also to alert you if you have a gas leak in your house, you'll notice the smell. So kind of a twofold opportunity there. And this is the Egyptian vultures. Like I said before, cracking open eggs using a stone. So that's another tool used, which is really cool. And it shows how intelligent they are. And they are also very social. A lot of times you'll see vultures hanging out together. And social birds and social animals are typically more intelligent. Wolves are very smart. Crows like to hang out together. They're very smart. Dogs, same thing. So social and pack animals typically have very high intelligence, and vultures are no exception. They are very smart animals. So now we'll get into some of the breeding. Different vultures do different things. Griffin vultures in the old world will often mate every other year. So keep that in mind. They don't mate very often, and a lot of times they'll only have 1 to 2 chicks. This is a huge nest made from a Griffin vulture, and this is its chick, just the one hanging out that it has every other year. And then New World vultures will nest on the ground, which is interesting because a lot of people will come up to a baby vulture on the ground and think, oh no, this poor baby bird, it's fallen out of its nest and its mother is nowhere to be found. Well, there's reasons for that. It's on the ground because its mom nested on the ground, and mom is out finding something dead that could be 20 miles away. And so unfortunately, people who think they're doing the right thing will pick up a baby vulture, take it home and start feeding it. Because those birds are very social and intelligent, they become imprinted on people. So there's a lot of vultures in captive raptor centers that could have been wild birds, but they were imprinted as a young chick because someone thought they were doing the right thing by taking home a baby bird and feeding it, because it obviously had been abandoned. But now you know, if you find a baby vulture on the ground, it's supposed to be there. And unless it looks injured for some reason, you should just leave it alone, or else you end up with a vulture in captivity, which they make great education ambassadors, but you don't want that for the birds. All right, so next thing, vocalizations. Many vultures don't have nice voices. I'm gonna try and play these and see if you guys can hear it. All right, so I forget which one this is, but, oh, no, that didn't go. Let me try that again. Is it playing? Okay, that was the Old World Vultures. I can't remember which one exactly, but they have a voice box, or a syrinx. So because they're related to eagles, they have vocalizations much like they do. But our vultures do not. They do not have a syrinx, and they just make crazy noises. They grunt and they hiss and they wing slap. And so it's just as crazy, like kind of noise, not a vocalization like you heard before. Then you also see them doing this behavior, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. I saw it this morning on a telephone pole as I was driving to work. They hold their wings out and they stretch them out and they sun. There's a couple different thoughts behind this. One is maybe they're warming up, but a study was done where it showed no internal temperature change at all when they were doing this. On cold days, on hot days, it didn't change temperature of their internal in their body at all. And so there's thought that perhaps this helps condition their feathers, or it's almost like a UV decontamination. So you know how they're using UV lights to decontaminate surfaces for COVID-19 and bacteria? Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's good for the microbes on their feathers. Hard to say, but either way, it's nice and creepy and kind of cool when they do that. All right, so the vultures of South Carolina, we already talked about them a little bit, but turkey vultures are one of the two. And to tell them apart, I can spot a turkey vulture from miles away in the sky, not even seeing the coloration, just because of their shape. So turkey vultures, they're found kind of all over the country. Their wing patterns are different. They've got a light silvery color from the tips of the wings all the way to their body. So you can see that it's all right here, the same color. Their tail is a little bit, it's longer and it's rounded, almost like a fan. They have the open nostrils and a red head, but not always if they're juveniles. And another thing that they do is they tilt their wings up. So when I see a turkey vulture flying, they have it tilted up in a V and they kind of rock back and forth. So that silhouette is all you need to know. Eagles are flat like a plank of wood. And then black vultures are also flat, but they kind of do this flat, flat glide thing. So even from far away, just getting a side profile, you can tell them all apart. So up close, you can see those giant nostrils that lead to that big chamber of swirled up tissue where they're able to smell good. And this is what a bird's ear looks like. And all other birds have that weird little ear hole, but you don't often get to see it. But since vultures are bald, you do. Oh, and one thing I did want to mention, they have a beautiful iridescence. So if you see a turkey vulture up close in the sunlight, they have green and purple and blue iridescent colors all over their feathers. So again, just very pretty. People just don't often take the time to stop and look. This is a turkey vulture nest. They're often on the ground. This was in the bottom of a hollowed out tree. And you can tell it's got that big open area. So if you're not sure which baby vulture you're looking at, turkey vultures have a nice, pretty white down, almost like a, I don't know, like a feather boa. And then black vultures, you'll see mid. They kind of look like a dirty ball of dryer lint. But black vultures, you can see here, a little bit different. Their wing color is also different. They've got white Mickey Mouse gloves. That's how I remember them. So if you see them from a distance or you see them over top soaring, white spots on the end. Their tail is more triangular and kind of cornered. And they do that flat, flat glide. And you can see this bird has its wings a lot flatter than the turkey vulture did. And it's got kind of a warty, bumpy head. Kind of like that. So not the cutest, but if you've ever felt it up close, it's so soft. It's kind of a weird thing to feel, but it's a very soft skin. When we have vultures in captivity who have been raised by people, like we talked about before, if you put meat in your hands, they'll stick their head in there to get it. That's how you feed a vulture when you're training, because that's what the mom would do. She would have food back in her crop, and the vulture would stick its head in its mom's mouth and eat the food out. So we simulate that by putting food at the back of our hand, holding it up to the vulture, and he sticks his head in, eats the food, and comes out. But in the process, you get to feel that very soft, fuzzy skin. So this is a black vulture nest. I mean, could you even call it a nest? It just found a corner and laid an egg is really all it did. So, if you just happened upon this chick, you'd think, oh my gosh, it's lost. But really, this is just what they do. They find a good little spot, they lay their eggs, and then this dirty little dust bunny over here is the baby black vulture. And if you could see it a little bit closer, the nares are a little bit tighter. In the next slide, so these are actually turkey vulture chicks. You can see the bigger nares here, and they're nice and white and fluffy. And these guys just ate. You can see those big bulging crops. So mom just came and fed them. These look like wild vultures, because captive ones usually wouldn't have a leaf litter nest like that. So vulture conservation issues. Vultures, unfortunately, have been demonized by Disney. I love Disney. I have 2 little girls, but my goodness, I do not do bats, crows, or vultures any favors in conservation, because they're always associated with something evil, the bad guy, the evil queen, whatever it is. And so they unfortunately get the bad rap a lot of times. So the vulture conservation, the Asian vulture crisis or the Indian vulture crisis is what spurred International Vulture Awareness Day. And it was it was an accident. They weren't persecuted for any reason, but vultures used to be extremely bountiful. There were tons of them around. And they started to decline up to 97 and 99% between 1992 and 2002. So they almost went extinct in a matter of like 10 years. And it was shocking, and it was a huge problem. And because they reproduce so low, it was even scarier, because it's not like, oh, they'll just bounce back in a couple of years once we figure out what's going on. Some of them only breed every other year and only have 1 chick. So the rebound time is huge. So what they found out was causing them all to die off was a drug for anti-inflammatory purposes. It's called diclofenac, and actually it's used in people. I had a tendonitis in my wrist, and I had diclofenac patches on there to help with the inflammation of my tendon. Well, in India, cattle are sacred animals, and so when a cow gets old, here we probably would have eaten it before it got old, or did whatever with it. But there, they actually medicate the cows that get arthritis and things like that, and they were using diclofenac. Well, it turns out when the cows would die, the vultures would come to eat it, as they would. But it caused kidney failure in the vultures. And so all of a sudden, this new, cheap, widely available veterinary medicine that people could use all over the place, they found out this is what was killing all the vultures. And we did a study here in North America, and we found out that it does not affect our vultures. So it wasn't an issue here, but in the old world, it was a huge issue. So much that it was causing pretty much the vultures to go extinct in a very short amount of time. So they did a lot of public awareness campaigns. Don't use this. There's other options. It kills the vultures. It's a big problem. So since the ban in 2006, the populations have begun to stabilize, but stabilize still is at 4% of their former numbers. And so it's still pretty scary. But one thing you want to think about is vultures are the main scavenger over there, and they're birds. And so we don't share a ton of diseases with them, knock on wood. But things that we do share diseases with are dogs and cats and rats and mice and other scavenging mammals. And so when you get rid of all the avian scavengers, you open up a huge niche or a huge job for mammalian scavengers to come in. And so those populations skyrocketed, and the amount of rabies that went around there, it was astronomical, the amount of medical costs and how many people lost their lives because rabies went rampant, plague, and other mammal-borne diseases. So vultures not only just help clean up icky dead stuff we don't want to look at, they help keep us healthy by keeping mammalian scavenger populations in check that can spread diseases to us. In Africa, very unfortunately, even with these very dwindling vulture populations, poachers would poison leftover carcass parts after their poaching, because the vultures would alert the wildlife agents to a poaching kill site. And so they would spread poison to kill the vultures so that the agents didn't notice a new poaching kill, so they could get away and destroy the evidence. So these tainted carcasses and leftovers also took a lot of vultures out. And like I was mentioning before, the mammalian scavengers is really where we want to keep control of them, because all these feral dogs and cats and rats and mice will spread diseases. And, you know, in the age of COVID, we know that's no joke. So this is a pretty funny International Vulture Awareness Day thing. Sure, pandas are cute, but did they take out the trash? You know, just appreciate vultures. They're not as cute, but they are very important for human health, controlling rabies, bubonic plague, tuberculosis, brucellosis, I'm not sure what that is, and botulism. Nobody likes botulism. So vultures are very important. And as of right now, 7 of Africa's vulture species are on the edge of extinction. Some of them are critically endangered, some of them are just endangered, and then there's a few that seem to be hanging on and doing okay. But a lot of them are doing very, very poorly, not only from the diclofenac, but also the poisoning going on. Now, our California condor, they saw a huge decline from a whole mess of problems. Persecution, because people don't like vultures. Egg collection, people are taking their eggs just as souvenirs, which is a weird practice, but it was a thing. Cyanide poisoning, again, because they didn't want them eating their cattle or their calves or anything like that. Loss of food sources. We all know that the Great Plains used to be completely covered in giant herds of bison. Well, once we came in and killed them all, they lost a lot of their very large sources of food. The big charismatic megafauna, these guys were cleaning up after them. So once they were gone, there goes a lot of their food sources. Lead poisoning, when people shoot an animal like a deer with lead buckshot and don't recover it, these guys will go in and eat it, ingest the lead, and get lead poisoning. This happens a lot with eagles too, as well as vultures and some owls and some hawks. And so switching to copper ammunition, copper core bullets, is huge when it comes to hunting waterfowl and deer to help prevent this sort of thing. So California condors reduced by a huge amount, so that there are only 27 individuals remaining, and they actually captured all the wild ones they could get and put them into captive breeding facilities. So while a lot of people don't like to see animals in zoos and things like that, zoos serve an important function in conservation, because studying animals and knowing how to care for them in captivity could help save that species eventually, like the California condor. So when it came down to it, they had to bring them all into captivity and take care of them and get them to breed in captivity. And they knew enough about them to be able to make that happen. And now, thanks to captive breeding, there's about 500 individuals from 27, which is crazy. And about half of them are out in the wild, and they're almost all of them are tagged. So they'll have little wing tags. So if you ever go out to the Grand Canyon, you know, look for these guys and see if you can figure out which one you saw. They're quite an amazing success story. And obviously they have a long way to go from 250 individuals out in the wild. Recently, I'm sure you guys have all heard of the fires happening in California. I saw last year during the fires, there was a condor nest that was really close to a lot of the big fires, and the chicks were up in the ledge up in the cave. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 chicks, but the mother wasn't seen for a while, I think because she had to fly away from all the smoke and stuff like that. And so they were worried about the chicks. They actually used a drone to deliver meat up to the ledge and feed the chicks until the mom came back. So it's pretty amazing the efforts that people have been going through to try and help them after what people did to bring them to, you know, the brink of extinction. So like I said, threats to our vultures, lead poisoning. Unfortunately, lead ammunition is still very legal. And we, you know, are working to try and ask people to not use it. It's more of a public awareness thing. So if you know any hunters, you know, convince them that copper bullets are the way to go. Rat poison is another big one. Using anticoagulant rat poison kills a lot of raptors, a lot of bobcats on Kiowa Island. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that whole situation, but if you need to get rid of rats, make sure that your extermination company is not using second generation anticoagulant rat poison, because the rats eat it, they get real sick and they wander around for a couple days. And when they do that, they're easy prey. And bobcats and vultures and cougars and whatever else will grab them and eat them as an easy meal. Then they end up dying from rat poisoning. So it's not a good thing. Car collisions is another one. Oh, actually, here's the picture of the copper bullets. So if you look at this, this is a lead bullet that's exploded, and you can see all those tiny fragments. Those will get scattered in the meat. And so when the vulture goes to eat it, they'll actually ingest a couple of those pieces, and that's enough to give them lead poisoning. And if they're captured in time, they can go through that detoxification process. Same with the eagles, but usually, or not always, do you get them at the right time. So this is what the difference is. Copper core bullets don't explode like that, and so they won't cause fragmentation and for the birds to ingest it, compared to the bullet on the left, where you get lead shrapnel all over the place. So again, if you know any hunters, let them know, because this is what happens. You get very sick bald eagles, and it happens every single year. And then the lethal rat poison, like I mentioned, you have rat poison in your home. Those things, the target animal or non-target animals eat it. And then you end up killing second tier predators and top tier predators, which they're all doing hard, having a hard enough time as it is. So last thing we want to do is unintentionally poison them. This is a very famous, or one of two famous birds in New York City. You may have heard about pale mail. It's a red-tailed hawk in New York City that I think it nests somewhere near Central Park or something. Like, all the birders there know it. And one time, one of the building owners was going to try and get them to stop nesting there, and there's a protest in front of it, trying to protect pale mail, that male, and their nest. But this is pale mail's mate who died. She ate a rat that had rat poison in it, and unfortunately she passed away. So it was a big to-do, because those were very well-known birds. They were celebrity birds in New York City. And it happens around here, I think, a lot more often than people realize. And then the Kiowa Island bobcats, we had Aaron Given and, I'm forgetting his coworker's name. He gave a talk on their bobcat program and what was going on with the rat poison. And so hopefully they're trying to remedy that in their area. And if it keeps popping up other places, we're going to try and work on it. And we've been working on legislation at the state level to try and get the ability for a local, a local town or a local city to be able to ban the second generation anticoagulants. That apparently is not legal right now. So anyways, we're working on policy so that you can actually ban it in an area if it becomes a problem. Removing the road bait too. So getting hit by cars is a big problem. This is me, and my very embarrassed mother took this picture. We were on our way to a hike one day, and vultures often get hit by cars because there's roadkill on the road. And I have seen people actually swerve to hit vultures because they're uninformed and they think vultures are bad or whatever it is. And vultures sometimes get so intent on eating that they're not paying attention, even though they're usually very car aware. Sometimes they don't realize that cars are coming, or they get pushed into the road. So if I see vultures trying to feed on a carcass and it's safe for me to get out, I will pick up that carcass and throw it off the side of the road so they can eat it in peace and hopefully not get hit by a car. Like I said, my family's usually pretty embarrassed when I do it, but whatever. I love vultures, and if it's safe, I'm gonna move roadkill, much to my mother's chagrin. And so the first Saturday in September is International Vulture Awareness Day. Consider yourselves aware so that next year you can celebrate in all the glory of vultures on the first Saturday in September. And with that is all I have. And remember to hug a vulture today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
People might want to unmute your phones or your screens so you can ask Jennifer any questions.
I have a question. If they're doing all this ground nesting, what's stopping the predators from attacking the nests and the chicks?
That's a good question. Vulture chicks can get pretty big pretty fast, and when the chicks are young, one of the parents will stay back and help protect them. But when the chicks are a bit bigger and able to fend for themselves a little bit, both parents will go out and forage for food. And the whole Egyptian, I guess, idea of, you know, vultures being very maternal, that was part of it. Mother vultures are very defensive of their chicks. So I think they use brute strength, hissing and vomit and the gross smell that comes from urohidrosis to deter predators. And I think it usually works pretty well.
Black vultures are not in northern US. I was up in Ohio last week and I found out that I didn't have to worry if it was a black vulture or a turkey vulture. There's only turkey vultures in Ohio. I didn't know. I thought they were everywhere.
So black vultures, it's interesting because they have been expanding their range northward. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I remember it was not nearly as common to see a black vulture. We'd occasionally see them, but now when I go up to New York and New Jersey to visit family, I see lots of black vultures. And so part of it is probably climate change and northward rangeward expansion, but also I think they're following the food. Highway 95 just goes straight up north, and they're able to get plenty of food sources from all the roadkill from the highways. And so I think that's another part of their range expansion. So it has been changing over the years, but in a lot of places like the Midwest, they're not quite there yet, but I'd say give it time.
Hey, Jennifer, it's Nancy. So I often hear people refer to the vultures as buzzards. I think I know the answer, but how would you propose that we inform and educate people that they are not buzzards?
Well, you just say you're wrong. No, just tell them that it's a really interesting story that goes back to the start of our nation. Buzzards are a type of hawk in Europe that looks a lot like our red-tailed hawk. And when the Pilgrims came over here, they were used to seeing their common buzzards, is what they were called, the big brown birds in the sky over in Europe, and they came over here, saw our big brown birds, which are turkey vultures, and said, oh, look, that's like our buzzard, our common buzzard. And so the name stuck. So buzzard actually refers to buteos or broad-winged soaring hawks. So if you looked at a red-tailed hawk, you could say, oh, there's a chicken buzzard, and that would be accurate. That's just another funny common name of the red-tailed hawk. But looking at a vulture, calling it a buzzard, that's not correct. And some people do not like it when you tell them that, I have found.
Jennifer, are there any places in the U.S. where the vulture population has declined significantly and the mammal predator population has taken over more, or are things pretty stable in the U.S.?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, aside from the case of the California condor, when those guys started to decline heavily from all the different things going on, there may have been a bump up in the mammalian population. But since that happened so long ago, no one was really keeping track of that sort of thing. There may be some sort of record in the increase of cases of, you know, a few of those diseases. But at the same time, people weren't heavily populated and dense, you know, living groups out there either. So it may not have been something that people noticed. But turkey vultures, you know, are still out there and over there, and crested caracaras, some of the other kind of scavenging birds. So I think the big California condors declining, they probably just got replaced by the smaller scavenging birds. So I'm not aware of any place where that has happened here. Good question.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions on the chat room. So it's a wonderful presentation, Jennifer. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Is there anybody else who's, Ed, do you have any closing remarks?
Just thank you, Jennifer. Really appreciate you being with us for a second time, and we'll give some thought to learning more one of these days about the right kind of plants in our backyard and maybe your banding expertise too. So thanks for being with
Absolutely.
us and for all you do. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
And Jolene, do you have anything, other closing remarks?
Nope, I just wanted to thank Jen as well. And thank you to Ed for planning the program and advertising and coordinating, and to Nancy and Judy for all the logistics of getting this, getting us all together with Zoom. And we appreciate everyone joining us. I enjoyed this tremendously, and thank you so much, Jen. And if no one has anything else, I guess we're good to go.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, thanks.
Thank you very much.